Okay, so foreign policy. A lot of political science deals with the formation of domestic policy, but a lot of it also deals with foreign policy, how we relate to other nations, and there are all sorts of issues the United States deals with on these, dealing with our neighbors. Because it's not just America; it is the whole world. We're just 330 million out of 8 billion. One nation out of about 180. So who's in charge of foreign policy? The official advisor is the Secretary of State for the U.S. Department of State. This is the website state.gov. And there are other series of other advisors to advise the President and Congress on foreign relations issues. Both the House and the Senate, they have their own foreign relations committees. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee, that also deals with whether or not to approve various treaties. The treaties have to be approved with a two-thirds majority vote in the Senate. There's a variety of advisors to the President on these issues, and they also work with Congress, too, on certain issues. Trade, intelligence, diplomacy, strategic issues. The idea is to meet initial present-day problems head-on and to try to anticipate any future problems, try to come up with different scenarios how to deal with this. So the State Department website here, office has its annual briefing here. Updates on the situation in the Middle East. Entrepreneurs sustain U.S. startup boom. The State Department also helps foreign businesses work abroad. It's just about any kind of issue that comes up. It's a situation in Ukraine and elsewhere. Like I say, we work with issues that foreign policy involves issues that may threaten the peace between different nations, or the internal peace of nations. What's going on in other countries, we keep an eye on that. We may not do much about it, but we do keep an eye on it. We're fairly well informed. Businesses working abroad. We also help businesses get started overseas, work with foreign governments, but also help them they run into a snag or something. Defense issues. Looking at strategic situations, how this might benefit the United States or our allies. We weapons sales, strategic assistance, maintaining our alliances overseas. Anticipating kind of issues might come up with this. Trade goes along with business, just the overall picture of how different businesses are doing business with the United and foreign countries are doing business here, businesses here are doing business abroad. Issues such as immigration. Somebody has a passport problem, or what to do about a foreign national in the United States maybe having some problem. Wants to become a United States citizen, or needs a visa renewed or something. They want to stay in the United States a little longer, or there's some kind of diplomatic issue as part of our foreign policy. But also, U.S. citizen gets in trouble overseas. It's the first thing you do, call the State Department, call the embassy. And our embassies are run through the State Department. Health issues and famines. That's also part of our foreign policy. How to address these both natural and man-made disasters. What happens if a large area suddenly runs out of food? Well, we try to help them best as we can. Pandemics. We heard a lot about the COVID pandemic when we were a few years ago. We're all quarantined, but there are a lot of other pandemics emerging in different parts of the world that you don't hear about because the State Department and our various health officials, they jump on those pretty fast. Like Ebola outbreaks in Central Africa, well, it's not a problem here because we jump on it and take care of it fast. Now, that requires the assistance of other nations. You can't just walk in some country and say, we're America, we can do whatever we want. You can't do that. We've got the military power to do it, but that's missing.
Although you have to close the door for future relations. Like,
Exactly.
If you want to help, they're not.
I know exactly what you're going.
You
don't want to poison the well, so to speak. You got to work with other countries. Got to respect that is their country, it is their law, it's the way they do things. You have to respect that. That's their ball game there.
And it's under the silent care of a big stick or something.
Yeah. So Theodore Roosevelt once described his foreign policy as an old West African proverb: "Speak softly and carry a big stick, and you'll go far." Basically, have strength, be ready to use it, but just speak softly, just be polite. Try to avoid problems when you can. And that's generally how the United States tries to deal with things. Have we always been successful? No. But we try. Some different countries require different approaches. But countries do require a correct approach to deal with them if you want to deal with them in the future. For example, suppose the United States wants to deport somebody. We can't just load them in a plane, land in another country, and say, here, he's yours now. Can't do that. For one thing, you have to inform their government. You have to get airfield clearance to land in their country. You can't just land a plane wherever you want.
Yeah.
And then if you're returning them, the country has to say, yes, we want them back. Yeah, that's exactly the problem. Yeah. A lot of these countries don't want these people back. They don't want 2 or 3 million people suddenly showing up on the doorstep. And plus, this mass deportation idea, the issue is, one, it would involve breaking up families. American citizens will get thrown into the mix and deported. And yeah, you can't just simply push all these people onto a border of another country and say, here, it's your problem now. It doesn't work like that. You can't load them up in a plane and land them somewhere. It doesn't work like that. See? The foreign policy, like so many other policy issues, there's what you want versus what you can get. And those aren't the same things. Diplomacy is, how do you work this out and make something possible? Sometimes it just isn't possible. Existing agreements, existing standards of diplomacy, plus you got to think about the big picture. You got to think with foreign policy like a chess game. 3 or 4 moves down the line. It's not just yelling and screaming into a microphone, it's working with diplomats. And guys like Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and all his predecessors, that's what they do, is they don't yell and scream, say this is what we want, we're going to get it now. No, you work quietly with other foreign ministers, other foreign governments. You hear them, you talk to them, you get to know them, you hear them out. And they discuss what possibilities, what you might do to come to some kind of arrangement. With our ambassadors, it's simply our ambassadors sit down with their ambassadors and their foreign ministers and say, this is what my government says. So what does your government say? And then you relay that back. It's very slow, careful back and forth. But with diplomacy, you've got to remember, though, is you have to be very careful how you present information. You can't just say anything. Some things you can't say. Plus, you also be careful about how do you say it. because you can offer them the deal of a lifetime, but if you're doing it in a very insulting, condescending way, they're going to take it as an insult. And plus, you're in different countries, certain gestures, but maybe perfectly acceptable here, may be fighting words in some other country. Example, I'm the ambassador to Saudi Arabia. I can't just go to the Saudi foreign minister's office, plop my feet up on his desk and say, well, this is what America's going to do. Problem? You show the bottom of that foot to anyone in any Arab nation, that's an insult. Shows them you think they are beneath them.
I don't think.
Yeah, basically that's basically like you slapped him in the face.
If I put their feet on the desk.
Exactly, but some people do that. Well, let's go talk to the president of Brazil for a while. And he's got a few issues, very delicate, to deal with, and you think you got immigrants. Okay. Problem? This is an obscene gesture in Brazil. We're talking about the ambassador, the Spanish foreign minister, about issues in Latin America and the Mediterranean. He just leaned back and said, well, I don't know. So we might do something. What I do here, I just look the Spanish ambassador off. That's an obscene gesture to me.
Probably your uncle.
And scratching it. That's an obscene gesture. Because you have to understand, we grew up in the United States. We tend to see things from an American point of view. We're surrounded by American culture, American gestures, expressions, and so forth. So we don't sometimes stop to think, the rest of the world thinks differently. The rest of the world sees things differently. And even how you say things in one language to another doesn't necessarily translate well. So even though you may be fluent in some language, the language of the country you're representing, it's still recommended you have a translator with you, someone who is trained and fluent in that language, because just one or two little words off, you could insult somebody. You could destroy years of work trying to build up relations with somebody. I get a couple gets into an argument. One word can destroy marriage. Same thing, foreign relations. One word can destroy it, and you don't want to do that.
And anything like that, like accidentally doing a scene, like in a foreign.
There have been kind of cases similar to that before. They try to keep those quiet for obvious reasons, but for example, before the War of 1812, the British ambassador lied to the President of the United States about certain trade embargo upon the United States. He had to go back and say, I'm sorry, I lied to you. British foreign minister fired him on the spot when he found out. And sometimes there are issues like dealing with diplomatic immunity. Because you are in someone else's country, you are considered a guest there, and you have to go by their rules. But also, because you are a foreign diplomat, you can't be arrested while you're there. Diplomatic immunity. Let's try to avoid somebody from being arrested to try to make a statement to the world or to retaliate against another country. Basically say, hands off, this guy's off limits. But the problem with that, though, is, there have been problems with guys who abuse that. For example, in New York City, the United Nations a lot of those ambassadors, they're driving around their limos and everything, and they have a ton of parking tickets. They they park in a lot of no parking zones. They park in a lot of they get a lot of parking tickets for letting the meter run out. A lot of tickets, millions of dollars owed to the New York Police Department, completely unpaid. Can't do anything because diplomatic immunity. Next day, and yes, try to smooth that thing over. There was an issue in, I think it was England recently. A senior diplomat, not the ambassador, his wife was involved in a hit-and-run accident with an Englishman. Basically, ran over him, killed him, ran from the scene. And the British government's been trying to put this woman on trial for this. And that's been kind of a diplomatic issue too, because yeah, there's diplomatic immunity, but clearly the woman broke the law.
Yeah.
So now, how does the United States have to deal with that? Very carefully. So yes, we recognize this is a serious issue, and we'd like to have a series of discussions on this to see how we can resolve this to everyone's satisfaction. So your job as an ambassador is not to cuss the other guy out. It is simply to relay messages. Get to know the guy. Say, you're someone, I, as the United States ambassador, I'm someone you can talk to. I'm someone you can confide in. You can relay your concerns to me, and I'll make sure the President of the United States hears it and gets favorable consideration for your concerns. So, ambassador talk. Like the ambassador leaves with the Secretary of State, Secretary of State puts it to the President makes a decision, they go from there. See, the one thing about diplomacy is, it's like our Human Rights Project, it's not slow, it's not fast. You don't have this immediate emotional satisfaction, you don't have this dramatic speech at the end of the movie, you don't have these huge explosions and you rescue the kidnapped school children in the bad guy's language. It doesn't work like that. It's slow. It has to be. Be very careful. Watch your steps carefully, but always keeping your eye moves 3 or 4 moves ahead. You may hear about some treaty coming up or something being debated. That treaty's been in the works for years. Very rarely are treaties made kind of on the spot. It usually takes, even the ones that are agreed to, usually takes months to kind of work all the details out. For example, the Geneva Convention, probably one of the most famous overseas treaties. Geneva Convention has met in several sessions. That treaty took months to sort out in Geneva. There have been numerous amendments in the years since it was adopted in 1929. That's something as simple as how do you treat troops who are captured in battle. Use of landmines. There's a treaty going around. Most nations have signed it. I think like 130 nations signed this treaty outlawing the use of landmines, saying it's basically these nations feel like it's unethical to use in war. So the biggest non-signatories are North Korea, South Korea, and the United States. Now, it's not because the United States is a big proponent of these. We don't like using them. We have a lot of Vietnam veterans and veterans from other wars who are missing limbs because of them.
Yep.
Horrible thing.
Just because you outlaw it doesn't.
Exactly.
Same thing with driver's guns, whatever else.
Yeah, and that's a delicate issue too. Is with all these foreign treaties is enforcement. For example, North and South, the border between North and South Korea is the most heavily fortified border in the world. That's why the United States is wanting to allow the use of landmines. So that entire border area, if any North Korean troop crosses that line, poof. Or for South Korea than for ourselves. Now, with war in Ukraine over, they're saying, let's send over a bunch of landmines, let the Russians walk over those. North Korean troops they're using now.
The thing with, I feel like those resignation, even if they did assign the things, they're not just gonna ignore it either.
Yeah, sometimes they do. And that's brings us to the next part of any kind of treaty is verification. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is famous for the statement, trust but verify. Put some kind of verification process in this. Particularly that was common with a lot of certain types of certain nuclear weapons treaties. There aren't very many of those. Both sides kind of know where they're making them. So we're kind of able to get a good idea of what both sides has. Because there aren't comparatively that many, it's easier to track. It's easier to verify. But sometimes this is just a matter of your own personal honor. So what happens if a country does break a treaty? Anything.
Punishment.
Yeah.
He shouldn't sign.
Yeah. Because when a country breaks a treaty, you go back to the 6 classic options. As our friends from Yes Minister shown us. 1, do nothing. Shows that it's either not a priority or you really or you implicitly agree with it. 2, issue a statement. Which is usually either ignored or laughed at in the press. 3, lodge a protest. That is, send a statement to their foreign minister saying we object to this, which ought to be ignored or laughed at. 4, cut off aid. There's a problem if it's a significant adversary and you don't give them any. 5, cut off relations. Which can be dramatic because it means you don't have any mechanism in place to solve these issues. And 6, declare war. Which is, if it's some minor trade issue, it can look like you're overreacting. But your 6 classic options here, there are little sub-options between them.
And then there's got to be something.
Yeah. Cut off relations. Well, the different levels of relations you can cut off. Basically, you can kick out the foreign country's diplomatic staff, demand that you're called, or call your staff, and just saying we want these people kicked out or this number of people recalled from your country. That's a statement. That's as a form of cutting off relations, to saying we're really mad at you right now. Recalling your ambassador, saying we're bringing him back for further discussion. That means we're really mad. We're talking about what we're going to do. And your ambassador goes back with new instructions. Cut off aid. Well, there's another way of doing that. If you don't give them aid, you can also cut off trade altogether. Various types of embargoes, different products, and so forth.
Fall under cut off.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a form of cutting off relations. But usually the term cutting off relations, that's your diplomatic staff. And 6, declare war. They can go everything from a bombing raid to pushing the button. Yeah, so kind of be overreacting. So what if, say, one country unilaterally decides we're going to break this treaty? For example, the United States has a free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. Goods go across the borders here. You don't have to worry about paying tariffs and declaring anything at customs. Um, what happens, say, if Trump says, you know what, 10% tariffs on everybody? We're ignoring the treaty. So what happens then? Well, in the short term, you have very much damaged trade between those countries. You have increased prices on everybody. But also something else says it for the long term. It says you just, without any consultation with other countries, even without any consultation with your own government. Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, we are representative democracies. Just single-handedly, one person says, I'm breaking this treaty, I'm pulling out of it. What does that say to you about your country?
You don't care.
Yeah. You're not reliable. Your word doesn't mean anything. So how likely is a country be willing to cooperate with you in the future?
Not very much.
Not very much. In 1920, after World War I, the United States basically withdrew from the world. So, we just don't need any of this mess. We're going to go it our own way. You do Europe, Asia, y'all do whatever you want to do. We don't care. So, as a result, we did not ratify the Treaty of Versailles. We did not join the League of Nations. Because we were uninvolved, while the world started tearing itself apart, we were doing nothing. Letting the world tear itself apart. The glib satisfaction, well, Europe's always doing that. That's always what happens to those foreign countries. It doesn't affect us any. Was it affecting us before World War II? Oh, yes, it was very much so. Certain people could travel to certain countries. Trade relations are being damaged. And as one nation after another fell to stronger foes, that was affecting us as well.
Stronger foe.
Yes. Like say France and Belgium falling to Germany, Manchuria falling to Japan, and so forth. That meant that they're going to turn around and have to deal with us at some point. It's like what Maya Angelou once said, someone tells you who they are, you believe them the first time. Hitler had said he would one day conquer the United States too. What was he doing? We found out in the war. He was developing long-range rockets, forerunners of intercontinental ballistic missiles, working on nuclear weapons, and long-range transatlantic bombers, which they're called America bombers. Yep. Mm-hmm. They were coming after us as soon as they got done with Europe. So,
Don't you consider that all happened while we did after we
actually, that was happening long before they
Yeah.
have their information. But
yeah.
Yeah. So, talk about your foreign policy staff. You've got your ambassador. They work at the embassy. The thing about an embassy is that is considered foreign soil. United States Embassy in England, Germany, Russia, South Africa, whatever little country you want to name, you walk across that little fence, you are on American soil. Basically, all the laws of the United States apply, they can't touch you. And that's by agreement. Same thing for their country. You go to Washington, D.C., walk across into the yard of the British Embassy, you are on British soil, subject to British law. That is their territory. Their little, that little yard there, that is their little enclave. But you've also got a lot of other people working at an embassy. You've got secretaries and correspondents. You got diplomatic staff, people in charge of the embassy, and plus all these fancy state dinners. Sometimes inviting expatriates in the community, basically Americans living abroad, to state dinners at the embassy. You have a whole staff dealing with that: who to invite, who not to invite. Where everybody sits, what you eat, so on and so forth. Plus, you have your security arrangements, which is usually a contingent of U.S. Marines. So suppose your country is, you send troops in somebody's embassy. What happens then? That's considered a declaration of war. That is their territory. Now, of course, this is the foreign diplomatic staff. This may you can get a job in the State Department doing this. They hire people like this all the time. You need a bachelor's or master's degree. Sign up for them, and yes, they will pay you to travel around the world. Get a nice pension after 20 years. Not bad. Plus, you have State Department staff here in the United States. What do? They read reports from your intelligence services, foreign intelligence services, foreign newspapers, correspondence from abroad. They try to collect as much information as possible to figure out what's going on in this country, these other countries. So it's nice work if you can get it. So, let's go back to the State Department here. So, among their many issues here. Here we go. Policy issues. Anti-corruption transparency, because that deals with everybody. Some countries, yes, part of their tradition, you want to do business in another country, they expect a little bribe. But in order to stop that, the United States and other countries have laws saying you cannot offer foreign officials or foreign businesses bribes, even if it isn't another country. Arms control, non-proliferation, artificial intelligence, because that the cyber troll farms in Russia who are sending information on how wrong America is on its policies, and if you click this link here, you can learn how to make a fortune in cryptocurrency.
So it's like disinformation campaigns?
Exactly, disinformation campaigns. That's done all through artificial intelligence and cyber issues. Yeah, there are foreign governments and foreign individuals and gangs are continuously trying to hack into different governmental and private systems. I've heard of ransomware issues. Yeah, there was a big ransomware ring that was based in Eastern Europe. They caught them last year. Basically, they went onto websites in different places like hospitals and said, you don't release this in, give us a whole bunch of money using cryptocurrency because it can't be tracked. We will destroy all this information. And the U.S. works with other governments abroad to try to stop that. So, arming disinformation, economic prosperity, trade policy. This is a big one. The Economic Bureau comprises an extensive group of officers, in this case officers meaning foreign service officers, focused on building a strong U.S. economy, creates jobs, and underpins national security. The central element for that vision is the pursuit of free, fair, and reciprocal trade. On economic considerations and policy and formulation, they build the relationships needed to expand commercial ties that drive American prosperity. Basically, got to convince these foreign countries that doing business with America is good for them too. Because, yeah, well, we want to make money. They're not going to let us do business in their country. They can see it's a benefit to them too. Go ahead and say, let this business come here or build a factory here. It's good for us. It's good for you. You make money. We make money. Everybody makes money. Everybody's happy. The Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs works to create jobs at home, boost economic opportunities overseas, and make America more secure because we are a huge export-oriented economy. Most of our products, they do come from overseas, but a lot of products that we sell overseas and buy overseas, it comes from several different countries, not just one. It's important for the world economy that all these nations work together. Trade policy negotiations, TPN staff, bilateral trade affairs, multilateral trade affairs, agricultural policy, works to open U.S. markets for U.S. products overseas and strengthen U.S. trade relationships around the world. Energy policy. Commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and a net zero power sector by 2035 provide a foundation for our prosperity and national security. The energy sector accounts for approximately 75% of global greenhouse emissions. Reducing its carbon footprints is a critical component to move us toward a global goal of keeping Earth's temperature from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Is that lifted?
Yeah, it's climate control agreements like the Paris Agreement and others, trying to limit the amount of pollution we have. 1.5 degrees doesn't sound like much. We're talking about that's a global average. Not talking about the difference of 1 or 2 degrees here in El Dorado, Arkansas, or not, but I'm about 1 or 2 degrees worldwide.
That thing before 2050, or
If we work hard enough, may not make it. We got to try. The benefits is steadily cleaner air, cheap and renewable energy. We don't have to rely on foreign nations for oil and for fuel.
because I feel like they keep on pushing it back.
They kind of have to because, well, diplomatic snaggles and everything. But to put it to you this way, something we cover on geography courses, you know the difference between the global temperature difference between right now and the last ice age? 4 degrees Celsius. Global change is a couple degrees. That's a huge difference around the world. Bureau of Energy Resources. And yes, don't we have a Department of Energy for this? Yes. But we need to put that in foreign relations and diplomatic language. Strategize with our people here and with on energy and foreign nations, their people on energy. Leads U.S. efforts to develop and execute international energy policy through diplomatic and programmatic measures. We do this by supporting power sector decarbonization, resilience and access, promoting energy security, security and supply chain for energy critical mineral resources, implementing targeted energy sanctions, advancing U.S. goals in international and multilateral energy organizations. Basically, find ways to work with these folks, get to say, it's in your best interest to do business with America, and this is why. Human trafficking. Kidnapping, selling people into slavery, usually into prostitution. Most people working in prostitution today are held against their will. That's considered human trafficking. But also got people being used as slaves on farms and sweatshops. But this is something the world is trying to work on. A number of terms used to refer to both sex trafficking and compelled labor. Relevant U.S. and international law describe this compelled service using a number of different terms, including involuntary servitude, slavery, or practices similar to slavery,
I
debt,
heard,
bondage, or forced labor.
I heard that California passed or do you want to disallow involve
California is very strict on human rights laws and slavery. It's been a big issue in California because they have those huge ports on the west coast: San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Most of what we get from Asia is funneled through those ports, and so there have been a lot of problems with people being smuggled in and smuggled out. A lot of a lot of cases of kidnapping, a lot of sweatshops. And so authorities in California have been working for years to try to diffuse those issues. It's been a very complicated issue for a long time. It's an issue very near and dear to the hearts of many California politicians, many people locally, because they see the effects of those sweatshops, they see prostitution, and they're trying to do something about it. But they need a couple that are trying to constantly trying to adjust their legal and law enforcement strategies to deal with that. Because these people, human traffickers, they know we're after them. They know what they're doing is illegal. So they have to keep finding new ways to cover their tracks, which means law enforcement has to adapt accordingly, which means the State Department dealing with foreign nations on this, they have to keep adjusting tactics constantly too. And of course, always going back to the question, how do you balance that need between freedom and security? You don't have the right to transport people, but what kind of powers do you have to monitor their communications and monitor people's movements? And then, what do you do when they're outside of our jurisdiction? So our law enforcement officials, they usually talk with law enforcement officials in other countries about these issues.
I was given wrong information. It passed, but it was Prop 6.
Human trafficking deprives millions of worldwide their dignity and freedom and undermines national security, distorts markets, enriches transnational criminals and terrorists, and is an affront to our universal values. U.S. follows what the LEU's 3P paradigm: prosecution, protection, prevention, about human trafficking. In addition, Department of State employs the 4th P for partnership, as a complementary means to achieve progress across the 3 Ps and list all segments of society in the fight against human trafficking. So among those, you have the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking Persons, the TIP Office. Get a 4-year degree, can work in that office. Diplomatic Security Service serves law enforcement arm of the U.S. Department of State. Operates in over 270 embassies and consulates across more than 170 countries. Marine detachments, also the Diplomatic Security Service. Science, technology, innovation. World's changing. Technology, that means opportunity, that means jobs, that means money, means America's got to be on top of it. So I got the Office of Science and Technology Cooperation, part of the Bureau of Oceans and International Environment and Scientific Affairs. Cultivates science, technology, innovation, ecosystems, support U.S. foreign and economic policy priorities. There's a wide variety of tools and foreign partnerships to strengthen it around the world. Office of Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary of State. Provides a focal point for the integration of science, technology, innovation in U.S. foreign policy. Anticipates the foreign policy impacts of STI research and development and the effects of discoveries emerging from the high technology private sectors. It's a central bridge between the Department of the U.S. and global STI communities. Basically, such things as artificial intelligence, the internet, and other issues. How is this interconnectedness affecting us, affecting foreign policies? Office of Space Affairs. Diplomatic and public diplomacy efforts to strengthen American leadership in space exploration, applications, and commercialization by increasing understanding of support for U.S. national space policies, and programs to encourage the foreign use of U.S. space capabilities. For example, the Space Shuttle program. We often had astronauts from Canada and Europe participating in these missions. Right now, the International Space Program, it's an international community of scientists and explorers, handled through the Office of Space Affairs. Plus, foreign nations that are launching satellites into orbit, they communicate to each other saying, we're launching this satellite, we're launching this rocket, so we know what they're doing, they see a launch of something, we know what it is, we know where it's going, and try to make sure that no one's satellites run into each other, because that could get messy. And artificial intelligence. Department of State promotes an international policy and environment and works to build partnerships to further U.S. leadership in AI technologies, protect our national economic security, and promote our values. Because we want to be on top of everything. If you want to be a prosperous, free, and safe nation, it means you've got to be on top of technology. The U.S. has to be an innovator. Treaties and international agreements. We got a lot of them. Office of Treaty Affairs provides advice to the Department of State and other U.S. government agencies on U.S. international law and practice related to negotiation, conclusion, interpretation, application, and implementation of treaties. You've got to remember, it's in the Constitution. The Senate ratifies a treaty, then that becomes the law of the land. That is American law. Example, the Geneva Convention, we're a signatory to that. Well, it was ratified by the Senate. Therefore, that is the law of the United States. Many others. So our foreign affairs also includes NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I have their website here, nato.int. I got the Encyclopedia of NATO Topics, Collective Defense in Article 5. That is the collective defense portion of the NATO treaty. Basically, an attack on one is an attack on all, deterrence and defense. Misinformation on NATO, NATO-Ukraine relations, exercises, operations and missions, cyber defense, women, peace and security. The member nations. So 32 countries through 10 rounds of agreements between 1952 and 2024. Most recent one being Finland and Sweden. Now, Finland and Sweden have always kind of tried to stay out of international affairs, especially since before World War II, but they're very powerful nations. They're very powerful allies. You want them on your side. But where we have ambassadors to different countries, sometimes we have ambassadors to organizations like the United Nations. We also have an ambassador to NATO. Someone there to talk with those foreign dignitaries and foreign defense officials there, convey our policy, and report back to the government on information and policy initiatives that they're working on. Essentially, NATO is pretty much most of Europe, Canada, and the United States, and Turkey. And also the United Nations. This is UN.org. This being an international organization, you have many different languages available in. Talks about the news that's going on in the UN. Our work, what we do here, peace and security, human rights, humanitarian aid, development of culture, international law, documents and so forth, events and news, get involved. About us. We're the member states, pretty much everybody in the world. Now, the United Nations was created in 1945. Made after the United States refused to join the League of Nations. That was Woodrow Wilson's idea of this group of nations to sit together and discuss and work out their problems on an international scale, committed to international peace and security. But the United States decided we're not going to be involved in this, so we walked away from it. As a result, the world's strongest economy, one of the most powerful military nations on Earth, the League of Nations just kind of drifted along and eventually went out of business, shut down in 1945. But the United Nations, Franklin Roosevelt starts developing this during World War II. In fact, towards the end of the war, Roosevelt's actually is often referring to the Allies as the United Nations. But why was he?
No, I'm saying about I'm doing an essay recently. Why 9/11 happened? And, maybe going back to the Baghdad attack.
Mhm. Yeah, because the United States, we have hundreds of treaties we've signed over the years. Some of them kind of contradict each other. Some of them are modification of previous existing agreements. Some are very limited. Some treaties are very small, very limited in scope. Essentially, the United Nations is a modification of the League of Nations. Charter signed in San Francisco, April 1945. Headquarters is in New York City. Make sure it made an important part of American policy. Made sure it was parked right on our front doorstep. Also, branch offices in Geneva and elsewhere, but the main office is in New York City. And have the Security Council. That's over the General Assembly. General Assembly is made up of all member states. And the Security Council is based, and they can vote on resolutions, all sorts of things, but these resolutions, the Security Council can put a veto on it. You have 5 permanent members of the Security Council. The United States, Great Britain, China, Russia, and France. So our main allies in World War II. And rotating, and 10 nations rotating in and out. The 5 permanent members get a veto over anything. Basically, one of these 5 big countries can scuttle the whole thing. But the United Nations, it is recognized as an important diplomatic meeting center for foreign governments to discuss different issues and work on common problems. And it has been very successful in trying to ending many wars and preventing others. Among other things is some countries are turning to democracy for the first time. So what do they do? The United Nations will send observers over to these foreign countries, making sure their elections are being run properly. When I was an undergrad at the University of Texas, the Travis County Commissioner came and spoke to one of our groups, told us about how she, because she was a county clerk in Travis County, that's Austin, Texas, the United Nations have to choose her to go overseas and help oversee an election. Some little country for the first time. It was a really interesting experience. But also overseeing aid in time of disasters, diplomacy, and so forth. They have all sorts of different organizations working through the United Nations. Those include the World Health Organization. It's like an international UN version of the Centers for Disease Control. Tracks and monitors pandemics, but also helps supply and maintain hospitals in different parts of the world, and provides medicines and vaccines and supplies for hospitals, especially in developing countries. The World Health Organization, they're very heavily involved in international vaccination activities, particularly like trying to eliminate polio and so forth. UNICEF, United Nations Children's Education Fund. Essentially, they go around, they help build schools, help maintain schools in developing parts of the world, the most desperate parts of the world, particularly those who are trying to recover from wars and natural disasters. The UN High Commission on Refugees. There are about 800 million refugees in the world today. People have fled wars and natural disasters. Usually refugees, sometimes in parts of their own country, but often in neighboring countries. And since these countries can't handle all these influx of refugees in, the international community sends in aid through the UNHCR. They set up camps where they make sure that people are safe, they're provided for, they have food, medicine, shelter, water, and help try to find ways to make sure they can go home again or develop a permanent home. United Nations World Food Program. They provide food for the hundreds of millions of people who don't have anything to eat around the world. That's the thing about foreign food policy. Foreign policy is there's enough food in the world to feed everybody. The problem is warfare and natural disasters disrupt the food chain, food supply. They got a lot of people who basically, you send in food aid, food shipments, people will seize these shipments for themselves and make sure it doesn't get to the people who are starving and need it. The people will try, there are warlords try to starve populations into submission. I'd say among many other organizations. But essentially, we have an ambassador there. In other nations around the world, they have their ambassadors there, and we sit and we talk. That's what diplomacy comes down to, is you talk. To avoid war, to end war, to address common concerns and common issues, try to come up with common strategies to cooperate with each other. Because we've got this one little small planet out here in the backwater of the universe. It's all we got. We've got to take care of it. We've got to take care of each other. Security, for trade, for the future of all humanity. That's what our foreign policy is about. There's lots of little details of our foreign policy. We could spend a whole semester talking on that, but that's just kind of the quick overview of it. Okay.